Mm. Um, all right. Today is an interesting day. So, some shit's been popping off as of late. Well, something called the Klondike Papers. It's uh, it's definitely something we're going to be talking about today. There's a good chance it will probably take take up a good part of the stream. So we're going to be covering it a lot. Um, from what I understand, some of the stuff is speculative, some of it isn't. So we'll be getting into that and what's what. Um, so yeah, we'll do that, and then we'll also have a little bit of fun watching the new philosophy tube. We have time. Klondike is big news right now. I mean, no, it's actually not really that big of news right now. The Klondike Papers will most likely not be covered by mainstream media for a very good chunk of time. So it's not too big right now, but we will be getting into it. It's there's a good chance that's going to take up a vast majority of stream. How long is the philosophy 2 video? 45 minutes? We might have time for that. So, yeah, I'm just gonna blast this off. And then we can have some fun talking about this because this is pretty big news right now. At least to anyone who's like remotely interested in politics. Because like literally everyone that I see talking about Canadian politics right now is literally talking about the Klondike Papers. And I guess we'll post it in there as well. So yeah, well, there's definitely a lot to do, a lot to talk about. So we'll just hop into it. So this is the initial post I found. It was on TikTok, and then I did a little bit more investigating into it. We're gonna be diving more into it today as well, so it will be so that we have a general idea of what's all going on. So yeah, we'll start off with
Okay,
this.
so if you're a Canadian and you care a little bit about Canadian politics, you should probably start paying attention to this story. The story being the Klondike Papers. The Klondike Papers is a complicated group of documents, 6,400 documents in total, that exposes some crazy allegations among the Conservative Party and conservative individuals in Canada. Some of those allegations include the organization and facilitation of the trucking convoy in an attempt to have a coup and
This
insurrection, the murder for hire.
this was later to be not true, but I understand where he's coming from because a lot of the allegations that had happened um with the individuals were that are in the Klondike Papers did have some contributing factors towards the freedom convoy that we saw. So, just to clarify, that is that he has come out and said that that is not correct. So, yeah.
Plot against prominent conservative individuals and our own prime minister of our country, and also millions and millions of
The two biggest conservative politicians that we know of so far for sure that these allegations are against, which, I mean, we've known about this for a while though, so we're not really surprised, is Doug Ford and Pierre Poilievre. I can't really say that I'm surprised. They're fucking conservatives. Of course they're dog shit. Of course they're gonna do shit like this. So what else is new, right?
dollars of PPE fraud from conservative governments that already has started to been exposed. So let's start breaking this down. And how did we get here? So let's start with who wrote the Klondike Papers. It's this guy. This is David Wallace. David Wallace is a conservative fixer. If you don't know what a fixer is, he fixes problems within the Conservative Party. And you're going to hear...
I think this was confirmed not to be true either. We can watch the video that this guy has done as well. He goes into it pretty well, at least for what we have so far. Like, there's like, it's like a 46-page document, like 4,600-page document. Like, no one's gonna fucking read that. Like, come on, even I'm not bored enough to go into that. So, like, only like either fucking psychos or the courts are going to be going into it. But like, it won't really matter whatever's going to happen, because I mean, they're going to get off scot-free. They're fucking conservatives, because conservatives are just dog shit and they can essentially do whatever the fuck they want.
Here, two terms come out from the Klondike Papers: wet work and dry work. Dry work is fixing a problem without actually ending somebody's, but wet work is fixing a problem while you end somebody's, David here.
What he means by that is eliminating someone. So like someone that's causing a problem, they'll take care of it. No, American style.
Only does dry work, and that's very clear to understand. David is alleging, with proof, that the Plymouth Brethren, which is a Christian cult that operates here in Canada, has been up to some shady business financially, as well as some questionable actions while meddling.
If I remember correctly, I think they're also a white supremacist group as well. I could be wrong on that, but from what I understand, they are a white supremacist group.
Into Canadian politics. So let's dive into that first. This is Gerald Chipor. Gerald Chipor is an elder in the Plymouth Brethren and a Calgary businessman, and he happens to be the lawyer for this guy,
Stephen Harper, and Pierre Poilievre.
Yeah. There is a recorder...
So, like, is anyone really surprised about this, though? Like, of course Stephen Harper would do that. Of course Pierre Poilievre would. From what I understand, reports of he has also helped fucking Doug Ford as well, allegedly. So, yeah, I'm sure there's plenty others that he would have allegedly helped, say like Andrew Scheer or Aaron O'Toole. Because I mean, like, the fucking conservatives are unhinged. I mean, like, you literally had like the most progressive fucking conservative in the form of Aaron O'Toole literally spewing Nazi shit out in like front of like millions of people. So like, what else is new?
Conversation about Gerald Chipor being the master funder around the Freedom Convoy, which we're going to get into in another video because that deserves a video in itself. But there's actually a pretty more serious allegation that's the whole heart of this Klondike Papers. So you see, this guy, Gerald Chipor, who's the lawyer for all those other three conservative individuals, asked David, this guy, to hire this guy, Nathaniel Jacobson, who we'll get to in another video because he has his own fascinating story. Anyways, he asked this guy to take out by any means necessary. You guessed it.
He wants to get rid of my hottie. No, not the hottie.
This guy. So you might be saying, JB, how is this all true? Like, how come this hasn't been investigated? It is being investigated. And the RCMP have all these documents, the media has all these documents, and it's being strategically released at the right times. But this is not just allegations. There is recorded phone calls, actual recordings of Gerald Shapur, who is the leader of the Plymouth.
So you want to know the ironic part in this? Is that, like, all these reported phone calls, all of these investigations going on, you know, when it's been released, like some of the stuff that has been released to the public via the media apparatus, it won't affect any of the fucking conservatives. Like, I'm sorry, that's just true. So Pierre Poilievre, like, sure, he's facing like a little bit of heat for it, but like, who fucking cares? Like, his fucking voters don't care. Like, why the fuck would they? Like, they actually, like, his fucking voter base actually supports that shit, so it doesn't matter. And like, understandably, a lot of Canadians should be frustrated with this, right? But you know, this won't be covered in mainstream media because, like, when it comes to huge allegations like this, we tend to sweep it under the rug because for whatever fucking reason we don't want to tarnish, you know, a bunch of dipshits reputation, even though like they're completely fucking awful, and like it's not even possible for them to get worse unless they're like an American Republican.
Brethren and lawyer for all those conservative individuals orchestrating this, including the Freedom Convoy, including massive PPE fraud. It's wild, guys. Okay, so if you're a Canadian...
So that's the general gist of it. He has gone on the record to say some of the things that he was wrong. He is going to be doing an interview with someone important when it comes down to it. I don't remember who it was off the top of my head. So I'm kind of curious. Like, and like the thing is that like right-wing reactionaries will see this as like a giant conspiracy theory against the conservatives, which isn't the case at all. Like, it's just idiotic.
Canadian, and you care a little bit about Canadian politics, you should probably start paying.
Let's add part 2 here somewhere. Where was it? Here it is.
All right, part 2, Klondike Papers. Let's dive into who is David Wallace. David Wallace is the individual who is leaking all this information and releasing all these documents, phone calls, and paperwork about what's going on in the Conservative Party, the ties to the Plymouth Brethren, and everything in between. But there is a lot of questions about who David Wallace is, what is his credibility, and, you know, why should we believe him? Now, before we start to say this is a big ploy from the leftist propaganda, David Wallace is a conservative.
Yeah, but like it doesn't matter that he's a conservative, because the dumbass conservatives and the dumbass reactionaries are going to try and spin this on the fucking liberals, being like, no, this is just liberal propaganda. It's just agitprop from them to, you know, tarnish Pierre Poilievre so he doesn't get elected or some shit like that. Like, we've all seen it. It's the same song and dance that they always fucking do, right? Whenever there's a giant allegation against the conservatives or like anyone else, like, they'll fucking bitch and moan about it, being like, no, that's not true. And then when, like, you know, despite the facts that, like, regardless of whatever it is, and like it does come out to be true, or we've known that it's been true for years, they're just gonna cry about it anyways and say that's just liberal agitprop, which generally isn't the case.
David Wallace was hired many times by conservative parties, by conservative individuals, to fix problems. One of the most notorious things David Wallace fixed was Patrick Brown in Ontario. If you don't know who Patrick Brown was the leader of the Progressive Conservatives when Kathleen Wynne was in power, the Liberal, and he was slated to be...
I do think he did get, if I remember correctly, I think he said that the Patrick Brown stuff was wrong too, because this was 2 days ago, and this was just developing, so understandably, you're gonna get shit wrong, and fortunately, he has corrected that. We can watch that stuff after. But yeah, it's crazy.
Become the premier. The thing with Patrick Brown is Patrick Brown wasn't really popular among Christian evangelicals. He wasn't that much of a yes man among the Conservative Party. So David Wallace was hired under the table by individuals within the Conservative Party and the Doug Ford campaign to fix Patrick Brown. Now, if you don't remember, Patrick Brown was involved in a Me Too movement, and some allegations came out of him being inappropriate with female members of staff. That turned out to not be true, and it was a completely made-up story that was not only created and distributed by David Wallace, but also funded by foreign political interests, including the Russian government and U.S. politics. And again, this is...
But, like, are we really surprised that it's the fucking Russian government and the U.S. government? Like, are we really surprised by that? Like, anyone who says that they are is, like, lying to themselves, because Russia and America are both very fucking bad. Like, let's be honest. Like, they're both dog shit. They're both psychos. Like, it's crazy. And the funny thing is that they're doing it to conservatives because they're not yes men.
is all verifiable within the Klondike papers. There's emails showing this transaction happening. There's email exchanges for money. It is true. Like, he is the one who did it. He's the one who created it. And that's who got Patrick Brown gone and got Doug Ford into power. David Wallace said himself on the Dean Blundell show that Doug Ford was a yes man for the Conservatives. He was able to get into power in a majority when an unpopular Liberal premier was on the exit and be able to be that yes man for foreign interests in the province of Ontario. Sure enough, this story leaked. Doug Ford advisor sent premier off his back.
And I think we'll be covering this tonight as well, so we can definitely take a look at that later.
Channel messaging about meeting with the Russian government. The Patrick Brown situation was the eyebrow raise for David Wallace and finally kind of piqued his interest about what the Conservative platform is and what the Conservatives' true intentions are. And now he's coming out with all these papers.
So essentially what the Conservatives' intentions are is the same thing as every fucking conservative ever, regardless of where they're from, whether it be America, Middle East, Asia, doesn't matter. You know, fucking kill whoever isn't on their side and like try and incorporate like some form of fascist ideology, generally speaking. It just changes from country to country and what religion they use, what fucking what the aesthetics are. It doesn't matter. It's all this fucking same. But like he's only like now fucking or David Wallace is only now like recognizing this when he came out and whistle blew
for work and all these documents and all these audio recordings, and that was the first real egg to drop. So should we trust David Wallace? I think we should at least listen to him. He was within the Conservative Party, he was hired by Conservative Party, and he has the proof to show that. So let's at least see what he has to say about this, because there's some serious allegations. Part 3, we're going to dive into the...
So yeah, he is right about that. We should listen at the very least to David Wallace, because, you know, he was literally fucking part of the whole like conservative shit. So, you know, of course he's going to have insider information. And like, I honestly think that regardless of who's doing it, I think whistleblowing is inherently a good thing, because it keeps the government and corporations transparent. So it's not a bad thing. Part 3 is the Freedom Convoy. So remember those losers that were in like fucking Ontario and shut down the government
now
for like a
soon
week.
But for now, let's talk about the Freedom Convoy and how the Plymouth Brethren was involved. What's important to note from the people that I've spoke with who have access to the Klondike Papers is that the Freedom Convoy...
So yeah, another thing I forgot to mention is that the Klondike Papers have not been released to the public yet. So no one in the public can read them. From what, like, the only things that we have to go off of so far is what's been released through the media, what's been talked about from people that allegedly have the Klondike Papers, as well as the statements from the politicians that are being targeted by the Klondike Papers. So like Polyev, Stephen Harper, etc.
Convoy is rarely mentioned in the documents themselves. So a lot of what we're going to talk about here is from David Wallace himself and what he said on interviews on the respected agencies that he's interviewed with. So to start, was the Freedom Convoy started by the Plymouth Brethren? No. The Freedom Convoy was authentically started by three individuals who have...
The Plymouth Brethren, for those who don't know, if I remember correctly, it's a church that generally tends to spread right-wing values and like fucking hate speech and like Nazi shit and everything like that. So take that what you will, but they did not like inherently started off like with the Freedom Convoy. They gave, if I remember correctly, I think they gave a shit ton of money to them as well, and then like they tried to make like the Freedom Convoy like they wanted to be like the head of like the Freedom Convoy, which I don't remember if it worked or not.
Have religious views that hold extreme right-wing ideology, including white supremacy. When the Freedom Convoy started to actually become a thing, the Plymouth Brethren attached themselves to the Freedom Convoy. They essentially bankrolled the entire thing. So yes, there was the GoFundMe and all the scandals around that, but there was still tons of money and resources coming from some high-up individuals within the...
So yeah, another thing, I think we talked about this before when we were covering the Freedom Convoy, is a lot of the funds from the Freedom Convoy came from America, but there was also a decent chunk that came from like England and I think Australia too and whatnot. So, I'm glad that the GoFundMe was taken down, obviously, because it's fucking nonsense. Like, come on. But yeah, no, a lot of the fucking money and support came from the States.
Plymouth Brethren, as well as some prominent conservative individuals like Gerald Shapur and others. The goal of these religious individuals attaching themselves to the Freedom Convoy was not to directly fund a coup or insurrection. They never said that. They never said, we want you to go start a coup and an insurrection, here's a bunch of money. It was literally to set the building blocks and put the tinder in the fire to really start the potential for a coup and insurrection.
Because Justin Trudeau's a communist, and you know how we deal with communists. We have to take care of them, right? That's how that happened, or that's how that goes, right? No, Justin Trudeau, my fucking hero. I love him so much, especially fucking Bill C-11. What a fucking dog shit bill that is.
Provided them food, they provided them money, they provided them alcohol. They kept the rhetoric going from conservative politicians that are involved with this religious group. All the conservative politicians that are sitting or not sitting that were involved in the Freedom Convoy, Pierre Poilievre for one comes to mind, they kept pushing the rhetoric that this is a thing for freedom and they want Justin Trudeau to come out and talk to them. That was a very...
yeah, like we talked about before when we were doing the Freedom Convoy coverage, a lot of fucking conservatives wanted Justin Trudeau to step out. Yeah, freedom and booze, hell yeah, brother. Yeah, no, they wanted Justin Trudeau to come out, and like I imagine that there was probably like a planned assassination attempt or something or some shit like that. So I can't really say that I'm surprised. But like the main people that I remember supporting the whole fucking Freedom Convoy was like Jason Kenney, fucking Heather Stephenson, Candice Bergen, Pierre Poilievre, and like Doug Ford. That's who I remember. And then like whoever the fuck the Saskatchewan premier is, but like who fucking knows who that is? Because like it's Saskatchewan. Who knows what the fuck goes on in Saskatchewan? Am I right? Oh man, a little bit sad that like fucking Saskatchewans are getting fucked over when it comes to healthcare. So it's true. It's true. Even I don't know what the fuck goes on in Saskatchewan. And like that's kind of surprising for me because I fucking talk about shit like this. Like the main thing that I know about what's going on with Saskatchewan right now is that they're fucking like privatizing some like healthcare shit and like defunding their healthcare system as their education system as well, and blaming it on like it being underfunded because they're cutting funding to it because they're stupid.
Common thing you heard from Freedom Convoy organizers, Freedom Convoy attendees, and conservative politicians was we just want Justin Trudeau to come out and talk to them. Again, the goal of the religious individuals involved in this was to create the environment so that one crazy individual decides to go to attack the prime minister or attack the parliament buildings or something in between. Start violence. And
Kind of like what happened in January 6th. Like they essentially wanted like some form of January 6th, but it didn't work out because Canadian hogs are way much more fucking stupid than American hogs ever have. Because like at least American hogs can like fucking have a little bit of fun and actually like pull like horrible shit like what happened on January 6th. Like at least they're having a little bit of fun. Like they actually hold up what they say that they're trying to do. Like our fucking hogs aren't bright enough to even attempt it. Because I have a feeling like even though like if they were Canadian hogs suck. I mean, of course they suck. Like American hogs have all the fun, and our hogs are so fucking boring. They are like the most boring individuals ever. Like they're so dumb too. Like granted, American hogs are dumb too, but they at least have like fun. They can do whatever the fuck they want. So, but yeah, it's when it comes down to it, I imagine like the RCMP or the fucking Ottawa police would probably just let them through like they did the American hogs that attacked the Capitol building in America. But like even if someone did like assault my sexy man that's in office right now, that beautiful commie, he that guy would get off scot-free because we essentially let fucking hogs do whatever the fuck they want. Like remember when like fucking people were attacking, or like PPC voters were attacking Singh and the hot librarian, and like no one was fucking arrested for that. Like it was fucking nuts. Like I don't give a shit what like political affiliation someone is. Like no one should be having to fucking worry about that and like be fucking attacked by a bunch of dipshits. Like I don't give a shit if it's like fucking Nazis that's attacking the politicians, or if it's fucking or if it's like say a fucking crusty ass anarchist. I don't give a shit. When it but I do like the Hassan approach though. If your approval rating dips below a certain point, 1 month that fucking politician should have a fucking boxing match with whoever is like, I don't know, the fucking strongest in the province. I think that would be fucking funny. Like Canadian politics is generally boring. I think that would be a fun way to spice it up.
as the weeks went on in Ottawa, as the tensions continued to grow and this rhetoric continued to boil and boil, and it looked like it was no end in sight, the rhetoric almost happened. We got to remember, this is still an active investigation in our country, and they're still looking into it. And a lot of conservatives will say the Emergency Measures Act was an overstepping of power.
But yeah, like remember when the conservatives said that the Emergency Measures Act was like a fucking abuse of power and shit, and like they were crying about it because they wanted like the 50 people to get out of the fucking road, so like the businesses weren't harmed, and you know, so the fucking government could continue to operate. Like it doesn't matter. They're gonna cry about every little thing. But I honestly, what I have to say is just fuck them. Let them cry and spear dick, you know, fucking public housing through, and fucking like some nice ass trains and shit. Like, let's get that shit going. And like, as well as like, you know, fucking clean drinking water for like native people as well. So, you know, why not fucking spear dick that shit through? Because like they're going, like, if you just keep spear dicking like good shit through, and like let the conservatives just react to, because like conservatives are just based off of reaction, so it doesn't matter. Like, they're just gonna cry about every little thing anyways.
Justin Trudeau is being a dictator. But you have to remember, intelligence knows more than you and I. So they did it for a reason, and they're not telling us. Okay, part 3. Let's.
But like, I can't necessarily blame intelligence for not wanting to tell us, because, you know, fucking hogs are dumb, and they'll try and justify fucking violence some other way. I think he has a video for corrections. Yeah, he has one for Q&A or FAQ, which we can watch, and then one for corrections.
Okay, so it's time to go over some frequently asked questions when it comes to the Klondike Papers, and I'm here to answer some questions that I see a lot coming up in the comments to the best of my ability. And please stay tuned to the end, because I have a huge announcement when it comes to this stuff. First things first is, why isn't the mainstream media covering this? Why are you not seeing articles from CBC, CTV, all that stuff? It's complicated. Having this much documents not only has to get fact-checked and validated and made sure that this stuff can be true, but also needs to clear a legal perspective, it needs to clear an ethical perspective, and it just needs to go through the process. There is an unwritten rule in broadcasting that you do not take on the church, and taking on the Plymouth Brethren is a very, very...
Honestly, fuck the church. Fuck it. Like, like, remember when we had, or we watched the Channel 5 video last week of fucking Church of Satan? Like, fuck them. Fuck the church. Fuck the mosque. Whoever. Fuck them. If you know you're doing fucking messed up shit, like, why not? What good has the church done? Which one? The Church of Satan or the Church of God? Because both have done good things. Like, oh, why not both? Okay, well, I mean, we fucking watched like a half-an-hour video by Andrew last week where, you know, they fucking do shit like, you know, taking abuse victims and getting them away from fucking people that are abusing them. It was great. I do agree. It was a really great video, and I'm super informed about Satanists. Yeah, like abuse victims, and like, you know, actually following fucking proper procedures when it comes to fucking COVID, even though like a lot of dumbass hogs and like even some liberals now are being like, yeah, whatever, who fucking cares, right? And you know, they just respect people and want to have a little bit of fun just with the aesthetics of Satan. But believe it or not, before the televangelics era of conservatism, you know, like the fucking preachers you'd see on TV, Christians were actually very fucking radical until they had gained a shit ton of power in politics, because apparently, for whatever reason, they're like the most dominant religious group or whatever the fuck. So, you know, there has been like a lot of progressive Christian led movements that actually have made some differences. But ever since the televangelist era, I think that was during the Reagan era, Reagan or Nixon, I don't remember. But ever since then, like, they've just become completely fucking unhinged. So, there have been instances where Christians have done good, but like the last like 60 years or so, they've been really fucking bad. Like, they've done so much horrible shit to like fucking everyone that like I can't fucking support them. I'd honestly rather support their main antagonist because, you know, he's a fucking cool dude who, you know, wants to keep me warm. A loving embrace.
Very intimidating thing to take on. They are very litigious. They will sue you for anything. And when taking on powerful individuals who have a lot of money that they'll throw away at any sort of frivolous lawsuit, is it worth it? So all that stuff.
Well, yeah, and like that's another thing. Like when it comes to this whole shit, when it comes to like the church and everything, like a lot of churches and a lot of companies that generally tend to side with the church have a fuck ton of money. So they're going to be what? Oh. Thank you. Smoke a blunt with Lucifer? Hell yeah. But yeah, when it comes to the fucking churches and the and corporations that tend to side with the church, they have a lot of fucking money, so they can throw it around for whoever that they want if they don't agree with them. So it doesn't really matter if like what you're saying is true or not. They could fucking sue you for defamation. Like, it's so stupid.
Stuff needs to clear, and that's going to take time. It's a lot to go through, and there's a lot of stories that could come out of this, so it's just going to take time. Follow-up question to that is, why isn't this out in the public? Well, that's also complicated. Court of public opinion is a non-forgiving.
I do wish that they would release the Klondike Papers to the public. All, what is it, like 4,600 pages of it? I think that they should release it all to the public for transparency's sake, as well as, you know, so people can make up their mind, right? But that's not going to happen for a good while.
Court. There's no judge, there's no jury, there's no defense, there's no prosecution. It's people see the thing, make their opinion on it. It is not a forgiving court. So putting this stuff out to the public without any sort of journalistic review in fact checking from the professionals and experts is risky. If you look at, you know, the stuff that WikiLeaks has done in the past, a lot of the stuff was scrutinized by the public for the dumbest reasons because journalists couldn't get their hands on it before the rest of the world did. Releasing it through journalists is a clever strategy that whistleblowers can do to make sure their stuff gets reported on correctly and we're not, you know, using hearsay. Third question that I have is, do I have the Klondike?
He is right about that, though.
Kinda. That's where we're going to leave that. Fourth question is, have I talked to David Wallace or anybody involved in the Klondike Papers directly? Yes, I have. I reached out to David on Twitter. We've had a dialogue back and forth. He is...
If I had a sizable audience, like enough to, you know, actually be of like staying power, like say JJ, for example, I would gladly reach out to fucking people like David Wallace and have him on the broadcast and, you know, have talk with them and everything, right? But unfortunately, I don't have that kind of influence or following, so like, fuck, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm a nobody. Like, but like, excuse me. But yeah, I would totally do shit like that.
Is given me some contacts within this whole Klondike Papers thing, and also given me a contact to receive Klondike paper documents and audio files. And that sort of segues quite nicely into my announcement. This Friday, June 17th, 8 p.m. Eastern, I will have Richard Marsh on my show on Twitch, twitch.tv/SheepKingJB. Richard Marsh is the gentleman that left the Plymouth Brethren, as well as who was hunted by David Wallace, by the Plymouth Brethren and Gerald Chapur, who David Wallace hired, to find Richard Marsh and turn him over to them. We are going to have some unseen documents, unseen audio files from the Klondike Papers for you all to listen to. It's going to be exciting. I hope to see you there.
I might actually watch that, mostly because I wanna know more, and update people on that, because this is gonna be an ongoing story. We're gonna talk about it for a good chunk of time, probably next week as well, unless shit pops off and I actually really want to cover some more shit, because it's very important and I can't wait. So yeah, here are some of the corrections that he has made.
It's time to do some corrections about the Klondike Papers and some of the things that have been alleged about the Klondike Papers from some individuals, including myself. So we're just going to dive into it. In the first part, I said that Gerald Chapur was a member of the Plymouth Brethren Church and an elder and the leader and all that stuff. That is incorrect. True. Gerald Chapur has never been a member of the Plymouth Brethren and never was a member of the Plymouth Brethren. The only thing that Gerald Chapur and the Plymouth Brethren have is a connection. That's it. There's no indication that Gerald Chapur was ever a member of the Plymouth Brethren Church. Second, there is no mention of the Freedom Convoy or anything Freedom Convoy related in the Klondike Papers. The reason I put that involved in the Klondike Papers, before we dive into the other crazy things, was because it's more of a subsection of this. David Wallace has some connections within the Conservative Party, including those who are involved in the Freedom Convoy, and he was making some opinions, and I felt it needed to be added. But there is no mention of the Freedom Convoy or anything Freedom Convoy organization in the Klondike Papers. Third, and this is a new one, there is no recorded conversations with Gerald Chapur. That was something that was claimed by David Wallace a couple times in his interviews, but in the Klondike Papers and the audio recordings, there is no recorded conversations with Gerald Chapur. So all the murder for hire plots against the Prime Minister that's being alleged here is not recorded in the Klondike Papers.
It's not recorded, but that doesn't mean it didn't necessarily happen. Because, I imagine, some of those fucking convoy clowns were, trying to plot to kill my sexy commie that's in office right now. So, I just because it's not in the Klondike Papers, that doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to be, or that doesn't necessarily mean it's not true.
Lastly, Patrick Brown. There is nothing in the Klondike Papers about David Wallace being hired to fix Patrick Brown. That was my mistake. That was a misinterpretation of what David Wallace said. What actually happened was David Wallace was hired by Patrick Brown to find out who made these allegations against him, and then it turned into the stuff that he found out, which I mentioned in the video. So while the facts about the video are true in the sense that there was a fix against Patrick Brown with the sexual misconduct allegations, Patrick Brown hired David Wallace to do that. And in the Klondike Papers, there's no indication that David Wallace was fixed or hired by the conservative individuals or Doug Ford to fix Patrick Brown. Sorry about that. So that's the corrections. Hopefully that clears up a bunch of stuff and some misinformation that was spread around. When this stuff started to break and started to happen, there was hours and hours of interview to go through, and a lot of it is opinion. And that's a clear thing to understand as we go through this. These are allegations. So, but now that we have a direct line to the Klondike Papers here, we are going to continue to report this, and we're going to dive into some of the crazy stuff coming up. The next step that we are going to go into is about Richard Marsh and everything around that. So that's going to be part 4. Stay tuned for that.
So yeah, that's the general gist of it, of the information we have so far. We'll be diving into it a little bit deeper now. So yeah, basically it's fucking conservatives doing what conservatives always do, and no one being surprised by it. essentially. So, an article from Maclean's. Polyev under fire for misleading email. Polyev supposedly infiltrated or inflated numbers. Tech companies not thrilled by Bill C-19. Was this the right one? Because I want to cover this anyways. Pierre Poilievre's opponent tells the Post a misleading email titled "Membership Status Incomplete." Panicked members into buying a second membership on Poilievre's portal, which inflated Poilievre's membership numbers. I mean, duh. Like, he wants to fucking win, so... And, like, I honestly don't think it'll matter. I think he's gonna win either way. Poilievre's campaign says this is not true. The whole thing is a mix-up. Lookout on the Globe. John Ibbotson argues that Poilievre should not listen to those who will argue him to moderate his message in the hopes of broadening his appeal. He points to a Sickle One take video that Poilievre filmed walking through a mess at Toronto's Pearson International Airport. Which liberal spinner Scott Reed observed show that Poilievre has loads of game, and liberals had a better start reckoning him. Ibbotson points out that Poilievre was in connecting. Like, of course, right? Like, is anyone really surprised by these allegations, though? So yeah, it's here. Poilievre doesn't have to pivot to be more like Doug Ford. Is it just the most cookie cutter shit every time? I mean, it's the most cookie cutter shit for like fucking conservatives. Like, no one's really surprised by anything that they fucking do at this point. So I can't really say that like surprised by this, to be honest with you. He already is like Doug Ford in the way that matters, his ability to empathize with economic insecurities of voters. No, he doesn't. He doesn't give a shit about the economic security of voters. Just fucking cares about lining his pockets, baby. Even more than Cold Hands Trudeau. Talking heads obsess over Mr. Poilievre's appeal to angry populists with crazy conspiracy theories. He promises to fire the governor of the Bank of Canada, his opposition to the vaccine mandates, his criticism to the World Economic Forum, but that's not why he has said what appears to be a record number of Conservative Party memberships. I mean, like, I can see it happening, to be honest with you. Like, I imagine it's not the first time that shit like this has happened, so what else is new? Like, but like, unironically, he does want like all of this shit though. Like he does all this shit. Like, he doesn't like he fucking aligns himself with populists and conspiracy theorists, as well as he wants to fire the fucking governor of the Bank of Canada. He doesn't like vaccine mandates because he's a pussy. because he's too big of a pussy to get the fucking children's tears and drink the children's blood like the rest of us have, right? As well as he doesn't fucking like the World Economic Forum. His message taps into more of the party's populist based. It appeals to everyone who fears increasing unpredictability of these times and who doesn't see their fear reflected in the words of and actions of politicians. I mean, like, he's doing like literally almost the exact same thing that fucking Errol O'Toole did, except like post-COVID. Like, are we really surprised by that? Mandates going. Speaking of the mess of at Pearson, the Liberals announced Tuesday the suspension of the vaccine mandates for federal employees and for train plane passengers of June 20th, CBC reports. Canadians entering the country from abroad will still be required to meet entry requirements, and masks will remain mandatory on planes, trains. Visitors to Canada will have to be fully vaccinated to enter the country or meet requirements of an exemption. So, yeah, it's crazy. The government is planning to change the definition of fully vaccinated to reflect the wearing effectiveness of the vaccines over time. Global reports. Like, what else did we expect, though? Like, we have a bunch of dumbass hogs who spewed a bunch of misinformation about COVID, a bunch of misinformation about fucking vaccines, and, you know, made fucking people, you know, fucking afraid. Rightfully they are, because, you know, no one's lived through a fucking pandemic before in our lifetime, so outside of maybe like the fucking queen, because like she's ancient. But yeah, like, it's, I can't really say that I'm fucking surprised at this point, because like, or like literally everything that I was talking about, like when the vaccines were, let's say the queen, fuck the queen. That's what I have to say. Go back to England, bruv. In the Toronto Sun, Brian Liley writes that the Liberals would have got rid of mandates sooner if they had listened to Theresa Tam, but they were guided by political science, not medical science, which isn't even fucking true. Like, medical professionals like are still like fucking worried about COVID because of how big of a problem it is. Like, it's still a fucking problem. Like, just because we got rid of like fucking mandates for being vaccinated, mask mandates, social distancing, that doesn't mean it's not still a thing. Like, you can fucking pray all you want, but it's still a thing. Chrystia Freeland will deliver what's being flagged as a significant speech on inflation and affordability on the Street Bay on Thursday. The Star's Heather Scorford writes, the Stars has learned that she'll have a $7 billion or so list in hand that spells out exactly how federal programs are ramping up to help those who are particularly exposed to harms of inflation, old age security, and child benefit. Old age security, the Canada child benefit, the Canada's workers benefits, the Canada's housing benefits. They have all been enriched with and are coming very soon. I don't believe any of that, because one of the fucking Liberals actually had the backbone to do shit like this? Almost never, unless it's like a minority Liberal government with, you know, them working with the NDP. Like, the only reason why Canadians got CERB during the pandemic was because the NDP pushed for it and said that they would not vote on anything else that the Liberals had introduced unless they had some form of relief for the Canadian people. But it doesn't fucking matter because, you know, you're going to have to pay that money back anyways because fuck the Liberals, right? In QP Thursday, Justin Trudeau announced the audience of the Canadian official at the Party of Russian Embassy as absolutely unacceptable. Global Reports Global Affairs Minister Melanie Jolly said Sunday that she only found out that someone attended through social reports. I mean, are we really surprised? The New York Times has a breezy item on the end of the whiskey war over Helens Island. Okay, fine. That's good that that came to an end. Abacus Data has a disturbing survey showing how many Canadians believe in false and outlandish conspiracy theories about COVID-19. I mean, are we really surprised about that? Like, of course, there has, like, COVID conspiracy theories have been fairly rampant when it comes to fucking Canadians, but not as much as Americans. Like, the only reason why we have some of the dumbest people on the, like, outside of like other comparable OECD nations, the only reason why we're the second dumbest when it comes to that kind of shit or just stuff in general is because we have America to ourselves, and a lot of America's brain rot saps into Canadian culture and shit as well. The CPC says Morocco Medicinio should resign because of his comments about the solution to invoke the Emergencies Act, CTV reports. I mean, no, the Emergencies Act was fine. It was literally just there to scare those fucking hogs out of the streets and allow the government to operate. All 50 of them. Like, that's the only reason why. And like, it only lasted for like a day or two as well, which I find really funny. Governor General Mary Simon and 29 fellow passengers rack up nearly $10,000 chartering bill on the government aircraft during recent week-long trip in the Middle East. The Post reports. I mean, are you really surprised? I'm not, personally. So, police face more questions about false bomb tips, about a false bomb tip that lead to the arrest of two Sikh rally organizers near Parliament Hill on Saturday. CP reports, Radio Canada reports that the French message warning about a bomb threat took 8 minutes. The translation. Tim Hudson is the most popular premier. It's the most popular premier in Canada, according to Angus Reid survey. And Heather Stephenson is the least. Like, are we really surprised that Heather Stephenson is like one of the fucking lowest rated premiers in all of Canada? Like, she is so fucking stupid. She is a Karen. Like, and she's more brain dead than Pallister, which I didn't even know was possible. I thought Pallister was as brain dead as you could get. But Heather Stephenson showed up and was like, yeah, no, I am, a fucking Facebook mom who is completely fucking brain dead. Like, I'm honestly not surprised. Who is Tim Harrison? Like, what province is he for? I don't remember off the top of my head. I want to make sure. Oh, he's Nova Scotia. What party is he from? Conservative? Gross. What the fuck is going on in Nova Scotia? What happened to humans that they all got hit in the head too many times? True. Like, what the fuck is going on in Nova Scotia? Like, honestly, like, if he's so fucking, like, loved by Nova Scotians, I have no idea what to think about Nova Scotia anymore. But, like, then again, like, every single fucking premier we have sucks, and every single fucking party that we have federally outside of NDP sucks. But I still have my criticisms about the NDP. Like, I wish Singh could just make up his mind when it comes to, like, fucking pipelines and shit. Just say yes or no, my guy. I'd rather you say no, because I love you. Francois Legault remains popular, but not with tech companies. Who fucking cares about them? Let them cry about it. Who asked him Tuesday to put the brakes on Bill 96, which would have give immigrants only 6 months to learn French. CP reports, and Quebec Jewish leaders say that they fear an exodus of young Jews. The Gazette reports. I mean, yeah, Bill 96 is complete dog shit. Like, I'm sorry, like, for the most part, when it comes to, like, some economic issues and stuff like that, I think Quebec does fairly well, but when it comes to the more, like, social side of it, I think Quebec is completely fucking wrong on that. Like, it's just, like, blatant transphobia, or xenophobia. And I'm sure there's transphobia that going on there, too. Montreal is the epicenter of North America for an outbreak in monkeypox. Le Journal de Montréal reports with 126 cases. Ottawa seeks new power over critical infrastructure to protect Canadians from cyber threats to global reports. I mean, yeah, the cyber threats is a thing, but I honestly think that, you know, when it comes to our electrical grid, I think they should be pouring a shit ton of money into that because of how fucking weak our electrical grid is. Like, if like, hypothetically, let's say, I don't know, Russia attacks our like, cyber attacks our electrical grid and shuts everything down, we have no way of fucking defending it or getting it back because of how outdated our electrical grid systems are. Like, it's just fucking awful. Toronto Police is warning its employees that challenging days are ahead for the force. As the force prepares to release a race-based statistic on use of the force and strip searching the Star reports. Yeah, I'll believe that when I see it. I don't think that will happen. Don Martin has had enough of Trudeau. I mean, who fucking hasn't? Like, the only thing he's there is to be a sexy librarian and nothing else. He writes in a lively broadside for CTV. Trudeau is too woke, too precious, peachy in tone, exceedingly smug, lacking in leadership. Which, yes, he's not wrong about this one, or this one. I don't think he's wrong about this one as well, or this one. Fading into celebrity. slow to act. I mean, yeah, of course he is. Conservatives are very fucking notorious for doing that as well. Short-sighted in vision and general uh, and generally getting more irritating every breathless whisper public announcements. I mean, I honestly don't think fucking Trudeau's woke. Like, what has he done? Like saying that women should have control over their own fucking body, like fucking trans people or people. Like, it's so fucking dumb. Not woke at all. I mean, the dude literally fucking did blackface. Yes, he's like he would be like the most woke conservative if he was in the fucking Conservative Party. Justin Ling has something of a debunking of some of the hype around the Klondike papers. What's this about? Oh, we can actually do this. I know too much about this guy, so I'm just gonna avoid it for now. But like, if the Klondike papers do turn out to be true or false, I don't really think it would matter. I don't think it would matter all that much, to be honest with you. Like, it doesn't fucking matter what the conservatives are gonna do. They're essentially immune from like fucking everything, like all fucking criticism, and they can just do whatever the fuck they want. So yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about the Klondike papers. I just wanted to touch on that stuff real quick. This conspiracy theory. Is it a conspiracy theory? About linking right-wing politicians to the church. I do think that I do think that some of that shit is true though. Like what, like even if like let's say it is a fucking conspiracy theory or some shit, right? It won't necessarily matter because like there usually there is a grain of truth to some shit like that. There is some truth in every lie. I mean, yeah, there's always a grain of truth in there. But like it doesn't really fucking matter because like the whole and like I honestly don't even think it's a conspiracy theory, to be honest with you, because like literally everyone who talks about Canadian politics is literally fucking talking about the Klondike papers. The Klondike papers to refer to a supposed cache of emails, texts, and documents that were never meant to be seen by the public. The source of these leaks is a whistleblower named David Wallace. Unlike other leaks of this nature, the cache is not being released to the public, only select journalists. Which, yes, I do think is kind of fishy. Don't get me wrong. But like, there have been other instances of leaks like this that have been that haven't been released to the public as well. So, like, are we really surprised? The cache purportedly outlines shady activities of the church as has been involved and links to conservative politicians. Because the leaks are not publicly available yet, verification is impossible. Which, yeah, I do wish that they were publicly available, to be honest with you. I would like to read them for myself. I probably wouldn't read through all fucking however many goddamn pages it is, because I'm not, for one, I'm not a fucking lawyer, and for two, I'm not that fucking bored. The Polymouth Brethren Christian Church is a Christian fellowship that interprets the Holy Bible as the Word of God. According to this website, it has a community of over 5,000 members across Oceania, Europe, the Americas, and the UK. The church has been subject to a series of reports by City News, former members coming forward to describe the church as strict and cult-like. So, here's the thing. Generally speaking, people will not know if they're in a cult until like it's too late. Like most people don't even, like, if they're part of a cult, they don't recognize that they're in a cult. And only when like they start piecing things together, they then they will like notice, hey, this is a fucking cult. So they'll do that shit. But yeah, it's I'm honestly not too sure about what to think about the Klondike Papers. It's still a developing situation. We don't know too much about it. So I'm taking everything with a grain of salt here. But there is a chance that it could be true because of how awful the fucking conservatives are, as well as, you know, literally anyone who talks about Canadian politics, big or small, outside, well, maybe not some big content creators will be like, hey, this I don't know, they're too busy like fighting like Bill C-11 or some shit like that. Dean Bell is a disgraced radio host who attached himself to this conspiracy theory. Taking everything with a flake of pepper. That still work? I mean, I guess. Bendel is known for making sexual comments about children, advocating for violence against women, and bashing homosexuals for ratings. Notably, Belden has a history of lying and spreading unverified rumors. This calls for validity of these conspiracy theories into question. He is also credibly accused of being a pedophile. Without significant evidence, coupled with promotions known by liars like Dean, this conspiracy theory is likely coordinated disinformation campaign against conservatives and Polyev. Like, the one thing I don't understand is, like, let's say hypothetically that they are right about this situation. They will turn around, like, I imagine, like, the people writing this article will turn around and be, like, in full support of, like, the fucking conspiracy theories as well as the misinformation when it comes to the dog shit stuff that the conservatives promote. No, I'm watching a Dean Dale video because he's not a journalist. The hack, homophobic, disregard sports DW and spews bullshit liberal lies. Now going to read where he even states that he has no evidence to collaborate is bullshit. So yeah, it's it's a developing story. We don't really know too much about it. I do believe that the the Polymouth Brethren Church could potentially be a cult, because generally speaking, conservatives tend to fall for a lot of cults because that's just the way that they operate, because they, you know, think that they're doing the right thing or whatever the fuck. It's like the fucking cult of like whiteness or some shit like that as well. But like, even like, let's say this like is hypothetically true, like this shit, that doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong, but I'm just not sure. It's a developing situation. We won't have any verification or anything until at least next week. So time will tell. I don't really want to shit right now. It's... Um. What the fuck is this? Okay. Yeah, like, so yeah, there has been COVID deals between some fucking churches and shit. So I can talk about this real quick. And then I kind of want to watch the new Philosophy 2 video after that. What's this here? But we'll cover this and then we'll watch the new Philosophy Tube. Because I think that'd be fun. Unless you guys want to watch the Johnny Harris video. Yeah, we can either watch the Philosophy Tube video that came out just yesterday, or we can watch the Johnny Harris video on inflation. It's whatever you guys want to do. Billions in COVID deals given to firms linked to Polymouth Brethren's sect. So yeah, it's we'll quickly talk about this and then we'll move on to some more fun. Johnny Harris sounds like sounds neat. I mean, we can watch this video then. He's a very big liberal though, so that's the one thing. That's one thing we have to keep in mind for it about him. So just take what he says with a grain of salt. Dozens of companies with connections to tiny fundamentalist Christian sects were awarded as much as 2.2 billion quid in the government of coronavirus contracts. The Times can reveal firms linked with links to the insular Polymouth Brethren have been handed contracts for PPE, masks, visors, aprons, tests, and ventilators without other companies being given the chance to bid on the contracts. It has been revealed that PPE worth millions of pounds supplied by firms linked to the group were cleaned by the Department of Health and Social Security, the DHS, despite being declared substandard by Health and Safety. The evangelical group likened to a cult. So yeah, as I had suspected, they are a fucking cult. Like, I can't really say that I'm surprised that they're a fucking cult, though, because a vast majority of churches do tend to be very, very cult-like. By some former members, has been connected with the conservative parties and MPs, previously lobbied for it to be given charitable status. The First Brethren Assembly in England was established in Plymouth in 1831 by a group who had become disillusioned with the Anglican Church and felt it had become too involved with the secular state. The majority of the members are born into the church through a rare incursion, with those without family connections have joined by meeting in local groups. Members are encouraged to set up their own businesses. I mean, when you're fucking born into like an environment like that, how can you say it's not a fucking cult? Like, right? This week it emerged that the DHS had written off PPE worth 8.7 billion quid last year, admitting to a significant loss in value of the taxpayers. Unispace Global, an office interior design company, that suddenly became a PPE provider at the start of the pandemic, was rewarded 7 PPE contracts worth of almost 680 million quid by the DHS in 2020. Jesus. The group that owns the company belongs to 2 Australian brothers, Charles and Garthan Hales, whose father is Bruce Halls, the worldwide leader of the Plymouth Brethren sect. Unispace Global recorded an 86 million quid profit in 2020, with the largest beneficiary likely being to be Garneth Halls, entitled to 32 million quid. Research by the Times and the Open and Candid website, an investigation platform, found that former directors of Unispace are connected to at least 45 companies linked to the Brethren, have won coronavirus contracts. There is no suggestion that the SecCo applies for the contract. The sect reportedly has 50,000 members worldwide, with 16,000 in this country. Operates a series of primary schools and business courses in the UK. Followers adhere to a strict set of rules based upon their interpretation of the Bible, in avoiding any they perceive as sinful. Members cannot watch television, listen to radio, or go to the cinema. Jeez, this is like a fucking cult meets meets the fucking Amish. Like, I even think that the Amish is like some form of cult too, though. But at least like Amish people generally tend like to be fucking chill. Unispace Global has transferred the money from COVID contracts to Senate Global LLP. Ross Robertson, 39, from Oxford, is a shareholder and former employee of the sister company, Senate Global Trading Co. 3 days after lockdown, Ross and his brother Luke set up Medco Solutions, which then handed 772 million in quid contracts to provide visors, face masks, and aprons. In December, it was reported that the visor produced by Medco as part of a 33.4 million quid contract is being processed by recycling firm Charity. A charity was set up by the sect in 2013 after the Battle of Charity Commissions for it to be officially recognized. The application was made by the trust of the church that runs the global halls. Ultimately, the watchdog decided there was not enough public benefit from the gospel halls from them to be given to a charitable status. The campaign to secure charity status was heavily supported by a large number of conservative MPs, including on Peterson. Their first mistake was trusting the church. I mean, I trust the Church of Satan. Does that count? Owen Peterson, Peter Bone, Robert Halfon, and Michael Elias. But no, like, I generally don't tend to have a problem with fucking religion. So when you use your religion to promote violence, hatred, and fucking killing people, and like, I don't know, fucking wanting to throw, like, I don't know, trans people off of a cliff or something, that I have a fucking problem with it. Like, that church actually does stuff. I mean, yeah. Joylon Magam, QC, founder of the Good Law Project, said it is very, very odd that companies connected to a tiny sect have won 2.2 billion quid worth of contracts. At best, it's a head scratcher. A spokesperson for the Polymouth Brethren Christian Church said the Polymouth Brethren Christian Church is a place of love, worship, not of business and politics, which is, I honestly think is bullshit. I don't believe that at all. Like, regardless of your stance on it, religion is going to inherently be political, as well as their churches are businesses. Like, that's why I'm all for fucking taxing the church. Churches are businesses, and religion is politics. Like, you can disagree with me all you want on that. It is 100% true. You are correct. Do not use your religion as an excuse to kill people or do shitty things to other people. I mean, yeah, it's idiotic that people do. Like any other religious group or church, many of our members run their own businesses, and these businesses are completely separate from the church. Any contractual agreements between the government and those independent businesses are completely unrelated to our church. Neither companies connect. Neither the companies concerned nor the DHS has responded to for a requested comment. Of course, they would be. All right, we can move on to the Johnny Harris video. All right, let's watch the Johnny Harris video.
No cool intro, no fancy music. I just want to explain inflation in 6 minutes. I have a
Okay, so he's going to be going over inflation. The main thing that causes inflation generally tends to be the top like 1% because of all the fucking wealth hoarding that they do. The more wealth you have, and the less you tax that top 1%, as well as I should also mention businesses too. The less you tax the top 1% and the less you tax the top 1% and the corporations, the higher inflation is going to be. The more money you have in circulation amongst the general public, the lower your inflation is going to be. That's how that works. It is really easy to not be an asshole. I am a bad example of this. Fair.
degree in economics. I spent years trying to understand this. So let's see if I can boil it down. What is inflation? Why is it rising? Why are people worried? And what do interest rates have to do with it?
The Federal Reserve is raising the
Fed is
interest
set
rate
to raise interest rates.
Highest inflation in 40 years.
Listen, I know that I make long videos. I'm into nuance, I'm into backstory. Well, this isn't that. This is quick. No, really, this is quick. Let's go. Wait, rewind. Hold on 1 second. Before we start the timer, I need to tell you that I was going to do an ad read in the middle of the explanation. Like I was going to stop the explanation and do an ad read, but I realized I want this to be an
Papela
uninterrupted
ad.
6-minute explanation. Now, and or even therapy quiz. You can
And
be
also
talking to someone
Papela
in like
BetterHelp.
10% and click on recording this video in 6 minutes. Here we go. Okay, first up, the simplest definition. Inflation is when there is more money in the economy than stuff to spend it on. But if you're like me, the simplest definition never does it for you. So let's try this. Imagine a village that has one market where people buy all of their stuff, their food, their clothes. But one day the government shows up because they're worried about the economy of this village. So they tell the people that if they want to take out a loan, they're going to make sure that the banks will not charge them a high interest rate. They want to encourage the people to take out loans and spend money. Oh, and they also drop off a giant pile of cash for everyone in the village. And everyone in the village is like, sweet, I'm feeling pretty rich. Villagers now are going to their market and they're buying way more stuff. Many of them have been eyeing the fancy electric bike in the market that before they couldn't justify, but now they totally can because they have all this new money. The store owner's like, sweet, this is great for business, but he's running out of bikes. In fact, he's running out of everything because now
Poor
all of these
business
people
owner.
have extra money and they're buying way more than they
Poor
used to. The
business
store owner's
owner.
like, I can't keep up with all this demand. I should raise prices. And that is inflation. But the village is all of us, and the market is the entire economy. When there's extra money floating around and people want to spend it faster than businesses can make stuff, then all of the businesses in all of the industries raise their prices, and that is inflation.
I don't know if he's going to touch on this or not, though, but generally speaking, it tends, when you have like an oligarchy with only like a couple really big businesses, they'll often engage in something called price leadership, which is fucking awful because like, I don't know, let's say for the as an example, let's say phones. Let's use phones as an example. Let's say fucking, you know, Samsung, Apple, and like whoever else, you know, talks talks amongst themselves and being like, hey, we're going to be raising prices, uh, you know, because of this and this and this. Like, it's a little bit more nuanced than that, but generally speaking, like, the reason on why your shit is going up is, yes, because there is more money in circulation, but there is also that there is also a whole bunch of other stuff to do with it as well. It's more than just money in circulation. And like, if they honestly want to get rid or like actually deflate inflation and bring down the cost of living, they literally just need to tax corporations and the 1% more. That's all that they need to do, and that will literally help inflation.
It's a natural part of the economy. It's kind of a good thing in small doses because it means that the economy is growing. And it's why movie tickets used to be 25 cents and now they're like $15. And slowly over time, it's fine. Okay, let's go back to the village and see what happens if we keep going at this rate. The store owner has now doubled his prices on bikes. The interest rate is super low, so he takes out a loan to build a new factory to make bikes. This is good. He's growing a business. But the government money eventually runs out, and his prices are still double. But now the store owner has no one to come buy all of his new bikes. And now he has this factory and more employees, but no customers. He has to shut down the factory, lay off everyone, and slowly start lowering his prices. This is called recession. When COVID shut down the world, governments
When it came down to, or when it comes down to inflation, like, understandably, a lot of fucking people are pissed. Like, look at gas prices, for example. Like, gas prices is an excellent example of that. Like, there is absolutely no one who is not pissed off about inflation. Literally everyone is pissed off about inflation because it makes things go up more, as well as like just increasing the wealth of those at the top. If they actually wanted to do something about that, again, they could tax them, but they could also, you know, take care of the basic necessities that people need. Like, oftentimes a lot of people don't have the necessities that they need to or don't have enough money to take care of even the fucking necessities. So like, even like, if the government was to actually like take care of the necessities like healthcare, housing, transit, clean water, food, produce, you know, medicine, stuff like that, like, inflation wouldn't really be too big of a problem, as well as the unionization of workers as well. That's also another way to help control inflation as well, which is why you almost never hear about Scandinavian countries whining about inflation.
gave us money, free money. They're like, don't panic and hoard all your money. Instead, spend and borrow and keep the economy going.
Well, yeah, and that's another thing. Like, I know like a very common point used against UBI is, you know, it'll make inflation skyrocket. That can potentially be true depending on how they pay for it. If they incorporate a wealth tax and increase corporate taxes, that won't be a problem. Because what keeps the economy afloat is, especially in a capitalist organization of the economy, is by people going out and spending money. If you can't go out and spend money on, you know, even like basic shit that you need, you're not going to be able to, or the economy is going to sink and fall. It's going to burn. which is why in a hyper-capitalist economy, you need people to have money in order to buy your goods and services to keep your economy afloat.
Here in the US, they literally sent us $3,200 checks. They gave $600 a week to people who were unemployed for months and months and months. They gave subsidies to people with kids. They increased spending on food stamps. I mean, trillions and trillions of dollars of stimulus money. This
Which was
vital
good.
aid to people in need. But even people who didn't lose a job got a check in the mail. It was free money for everyone.
That's not a bad thing, though.
And we spent it.
I just picked up myself a new bike. Demand is up across the country.
It's time to grind, Peloton.
We all just got these big checks from the government. During a pandemic, we're like, YOLO, I'm buying a boat or a Peloton or what.
And like, to be honest with you, I don't give a shit if people want to spend their money on stupid shit like this. I honestly don't care. Like, if people want to get like a fucking PS5 or some shit, I say let them. Like, I think that the average worker should be allowed to indulge in more luxury items. I don't give a shit if they want to buy a boat or a bike or a new game console or whatever the fuck. Like, no, like they deserve, like the workers deserve, you know, to be able to buy, you know, shit that they want as well. Like, it's very important for them to, it's very important for them, like, and like most of the time, like they generally tend to spend it on shit that they need to do, like say bills or fucking food or some other shit like that. Sounds more like weed money to me. Hell yeah, brother.
Whatever.
Pokemon cards.
There's Netflix.
Fortnite,
A new motor.
Peloton,
Soak in a hot tub.
Animal Crossing.
Push it out a little bit so it fits.
No, don't you dare!
But pair all this new spending with the fact that the pandemic also made it harder for factories and ships and retailers to get us all this stuff.
Supply chain issue.
Global supply chain.
Supply chain.
So now you have an economy where people have way more money than normal and they're ready to spend it, but the economy can't get them stuff fast enough. So what do businesses do with all this insane new demand? They raise prices all at the same time, and that is inflation. I feel like we're getting this at this point. But what do interest rates have to do with all this?
Raising the interest rate.
Interest rate.
Or the Fed?
Federal Reserve.
The Federal Reserve.
Most countries have a central bank, the puppet master of the economy, the bank of all banks for that country. But it's not like a normal bank that stores our money and then lends it out and collects interest to make profit. That's what a normal private bank does. The central bank, which we call
Fuck
the
the
Fed
banks.
here in the US, is run by the government. So their job is to set the rules or policies that all the other banks have to follow. And the central bank isn't motivated by profit, but rather their job is to babysit the economy, to keep it growing, to make sure people have jobs, to make sure that prices don't fluctuate too much so that we can keep growing nicely. No slowdown, no recession.
One thing I should mention though is the Canadian dollar being lower than the American dollar is actually a good thing. The reason why it's a good thing is because it makes foreign companies want to come and set up shop in Canada over America. Because if they had a choice in the matter, they would rather set up shop in America because of all their loopholes when it comes to the laws. We have our fair share of loopholes here as well, but we're better than America when it comes to that. I just thought I should mention that.
That is what the Fed is there for. But seriously, the Fed is like a puppet master, and we're the puppets, and it's kind of creepy. They pull strings in the economy to get us to spend our money in a certain way, which in turn affects how much businesses raise or drop their prices. And guess what? It totally works. One of the strings that
You want to know the funny thing though is that once businesses raise their prices, they very rarely drop prices. There's a good chance that, you know, they're going to keep the prices high as they are because every business wants to have exponential growth every single year. It's impossible to have infinite growth with finite resources, which is why you'll often see very rarely like cuts to prices. Some almost never drop prices. I mean, yeah, I literally just said that. Like they almost never cut prices because they want to keep getting more and more money each year. Uh, every business does. And the problem with that is that when you're dealing with a finite amount of resources, let's say, I don't know, cobalt. Let's say you're making, let's say you need cobalt for batteries, and let's say let's say you make a battery factory. You want to have as much of a monopoly on that as you can in order to continually grow and grow each and every year. And so as a result of that, you can like raise prices, you can buy out your competition either vertically or horizontally, or I should say the supply chain, either vertically or horizontally, so that you can gain more profits. So
that they have to pull in the economy is called the interest rate. Want to borrow money to buy a car or a house or expand your business? You're going to be way more likely to do that if you only have to pay 2% interest on that loan as opposed to like 6%. Lower interest rates equal people and businesses want to borrow and spend money. So during the pandemic, the central bank was like, we need everyone to spend money. So they lowered the interest rate and people borrowed and people spent and it totally worked. We're like freaking puppets. So a low interest rate helps stimulate the economy. But once again, we're in this same place where there's now too much money to borrow and spend and not enough goods and services to spend it on. So what do businesses do all at the same time? They raise prices to meet all this new demand all at the same time. And now your money is worth less. And that is inflation.
Home prices rising at their highest rate.
Astronomical bidding wars.
Rents are going up
By nearly 24%.
So that's what's happening right now. All the prices are rising kind of at the same time. What that means is that your $100 bill is now worth 8% less than it was last year. Like the same money is worth less because your purchasing power just got diluted. And imagine if that keeps happening. Like instead of 8%, it's 50%. Now your $100 bill is worth what $50 used to be. And that's when people start to freak out. And our economy that's built on human psychology starts to falter and we fall into a recession or a depression even, if it gets real bad, which is exactly what the Fed is built to avoid. So they're back to pulling their strings.
the funny thing is that conservatives are like, yeah, no, fucking the liberals wherever they are, you know, they want a fucking like recession or depression. I'm like, no, that looks incredibly fucking bad on them. So why the fuck would they want to have a recession or depression that's caused by them?
And they've started raising rates.
The Federal Reserve is raising interest
The
rates.
Federal Reserve taking action to try and curb rising inflation.
They're gently raising the interest rate to cool down all of this hardcore spending and borrowing. See if they can steer the ship back on course. And let's hope it works. Okay, did we do it? Did we do it in the time period that I promised I would? We'll find out. Okay, last thing I want to say is a thing that didn't make it into my little inflation explainer. But a few years ago, when I worked at Vox, I went to Venezuela and Colombia to do a Borders series. I saw inflation up close and personal because in Venezuela, inflation got so out of control and they couldn't, the Fed, the puppet master couldn't like figure out how to get it back in control that their money became worth nothing. The prices went up so high that their money became basically worthless. You needed like a pile of cash to buy bread.
The same thing happened in post World War I Germany, if I remember correctly, where like you would literally need wheelbarrows of marks in order to, you know, pay for your like a loaf of bread. But like they introduced like a new marks bill where you could trade in like a certain amount of money and, you know, get a new one and it would be worth more. But like Honestly, like the whole reason on why Venezuela is undergoing like such massive inflation and a depression is because of a lot of fucking foreign companies, especially oil companies, going in and taking like all the fucking money away from the people there, so the government has to print more money. Everybody walking around like Mr. Moneybags from one. True.
So what they started doing is they started using the currency itself to make things. Like I visited this guy on the street who was making like purses and bags and like sculptures
That's
out of
actually
cash
kind of cool.
because it was worth more as a raw material than it was as like money, as a currency, which is insane. That's a very extreme version of inflation. It's happened in several countries that have done this. We're not in that situation, even close to that situation, but it's an example of just how tenuous modern economies are. They're not like pegged to gold or whatever. They're like pegged to a bunch of humans believing that this stuff is worth something, and it can quickly go off the rails. So I thought I'd share that little fun thing that is more documented in the Vox Borders episode that you can go watch on the Vox YouTube channel. So that's all I've got. Thank you all for being here.
All right, let's get off of lib Johnny Harris and let's watch the new Philosophy 2, baby.
Stay tuned at the end of this episode to find out how you can get tickets to see The Prince, a new theatre show coming to the Southwark Playhouse in London this September. Hello, my name's Abigail. Welcome to Philosophy Tube, a show about ideas. On tonight's episode, we're going to look at some true crime. I've got my makeup ready and my relatable girl next door influencer personality, and I'm ready to take you on an exciting journey through the dark, seedy underbelly of Detroit property taxes.
So social constructs are things are things like, say, gender, because gender and sex are not the same thing, unless you're fucking conservative and have a very rigid understanding of gender. Like, anyone who's born female is female and anyone who's born male is male. Gender is more fluent than that. Like, there's trans people that exist, there's fucking there's other shit like that. I personally believe that money is a social construct. It only has value because we give it value, instead of fucking the workers who are actually generating the value, as well as a whole bunch of other things that I imagine she'll probably talk about.
In the early 2000s. For real though, it is actually fascinating and quite dark. If you own a house, you've got to pay taxes on it every year. How much you pay depends on how much it's worth. If you have a really nice house, you pay more. If you live in an old ruin, you pay less. Or at least, that's how it's supposed to work. But starting in 2009, the city of Detroit
I misread. I can't read, apparently.
that a lot of old, run-down houses in poor neighborhoods, predominantly black neighborhoods, were actually worth loads of money, and raised the property taxes on them by a huge amount.
I didn't realize it said contract.
Couldn't afford the
I thought
new
it said
taxes,
construct.
so they got their homes
English fucking
foreclosed
sucks,
on,
man.
about 100,000 homes in total. And obviously this made them miserable, stressed, poor, homeless, and even dead. And it was illegal. Michigan has a law on the books that says authorities can't value a home for tax purposes at more than 50% of its market
English
value.
is not fun.
And many of the residents weren't supposed to be paying any taxes anyway because they were living below the poverty threshold. So double illegal. The truest crime there is. But the law was just ignored. Even after the evidence came out that this was illegal, city officials said, well, just pay your taxes, you bums. And if you don't, you get evicted. And what are you supposed to say to that? You're going to hire a lawyer? Well, how can you afford one? Because the city can afford a great lawyer. Now they've pocketed all the cash they got from selling your house.
It's free real estate.
Hell yeah.
Essentially, the government of Detroit and Wayne County, Michigan, stole tens of thousands of houses from poor people, mainly poor black people, despite the fact that they were allegedly living in a democratic system where there were rules in place specifically to prevent that very thing. How did this happen?
America.
What does it tell us
America
about the
be
real
like.
nature of that system? What has happened to the social contract? To answer that, we're going to learn what the social contract is, what its weaknesses are, and then what's happening to it today. If you enjoyed tonight's performance, you can sign up at patreon.com/philosophytube to pledge a couple of dollars a month to support free educational material like this. But I don't think that relatable girl next door is really the appropriate aesthetic for a true crime of this magnitude. Since we're taking on a devilishly difficult case, we are going to need a devilishly difficult lawyer. Hey there, I'm Trixie Mephistopheles from the law firm Beelzebub, and Jones. I'll be preparing your briefs. Here's the deal. The social contract is an idea that's turned up in various philosophers' works over the last 350 years. If I explain all of them in detail, we'll be here till Armageddon. As a demon, I have forever, but as a lawyer, I charge by the hour. So let me give you the broad strokes. We live, it has been said, in a society. How did that happen? Well, philosophers who subscribe to this social contract idea like to imagine a time before society existed, when there were no rules or laws yet. They call it the state of nature. What exactly the
I really
state of
like
nature
Abigail's
was like
outfit.
depends on who you read.
Yeah, I
English
was just
philosopher
about.
Thomas
I was just
Hobbes
thinking
said
about
it was pretty
that. I really love Abigail's outfit. Looks great.
Hellish. Life in the state of nature was solitary, nasty, poor, brutish, and short, a war of all against all. Later philosophers, like Frenchman Jean-Jacques Rousseau, said it might not have been so bad because humans have a natural tendency towards compassion. John Locke, another name we'll be hearing a lot, said that there were still some rules, some morality placed in humans by God. Bottom line, the state of nature was whatever came
the wings do look
naturally
nice.
to human beings, which could have been a lot of things. Society is everything that got built on top. In the state of nature, people had some freedoms that they don't have now. For instance, if somebody steals your stuff in the state of nature, you can go and clobber them. You can't do that now. There's a justice system that's supposed to handle it. Unless you live in Detroit. But because the state of nature has some downsides, like anybody can clobber you and it's hard to get stuff done, people came together and agreed to live in a society. That agreement is called the social contract. This is a very...
I love the fact when, like, fucking conservatives are like, no, you know, people are inherently fucking violent and evil and want to, you know, fucking murder each other and not live in a society. I love that fucking argument so much. I'm like, that's not even true. Because if that was the case, we would not, humans would not have survived that long.
Very important detail, so it's worth making sure that you get it. The idea is that humanity's natural state is freedom. That nobody is born having political authority over anybody else. One of Rousseau's most famous lines was, "Man is born free and everywhere he is in chains." The first 4 words there are, man is born free. That's going to be important in a moment. The outcome of the social contract, though, is that people gave up some of their natural freedoms in exchange for the benefits of living in a society. Like, okay, you can't clobber anyone who takes your stuff anymore, but on the flip side, you get a justice system and medicine and opera and mobile phones and pork pies and all the other things that humans enjoy. In particular, John Locke said one of the great things you get out of the...
And fucking trains. Oh, wait, we don't have trains. fuck? What is like Japan and China get to have all the fucking fun when it comes to the Trusty man? Like, we need some Trusty over here.
Social contract is your private property gets secured. Again, unless you live in Detroit. There are a few things hidden in the fine print here that depend on who you read, like who made this agreement. Hobbes said it was individuals, Locke and Rousseau said it was families. And what exactly did they agree on? Some writers say the social contract created the rules of morality, or governments, or laws, or specific institutions. There was a modern philosopher called John Rawls who had his own version, but we're not going to worry about him for today. So that's the basic idea in a nutshell. You've got your three main ingredients. The state of nature, where everyone's naturally free, the people who came together, and the agreement they made to limit their freedom in exchange for civilization.
I want trains. I mean, who doesn't want fucking Trusty, man? Trusty is great. I will literally, like, I want the fucking culture around trains that Japan has. Like, they fucking love their trains. Like, it's great. I really want that here.
Now your
The Netherlands have a whole road thing, down, bikes everywhere. I mean, yeah, if we literally focus on like fucking public transit in the form of like trains, cable cars, and buses, as well as you know, fucking biking everywhere or walking, not only would we be more healthy because, you know, we'd be getting exercise, we would also have like a lot less congestion everywhere as well, because I will gladly fucking take the train. Ugh, choo choo, man.
very clever. So you've probably already realized that that's a load of bollocks. That never happened. That's completely made up. And yes, people have been saying that since the beginning. Here's Scottish philosopher David Hume writing in 1752.
Were you to preach in most parts of the world that political connections are founded altogether on voluntary consent or a mutual promise, the magistrate would soon imprison you as seditious for loosening the ties of obedience. If your friends did not before shut you up as delirious for advancing such absurdities, almost all the governments which exist at present, or of which there remains any record in story, have been founded originally either on usurpation or conquest or both.
In fact, even if that whole story about the state of nature was true, so what? If your ancestors agreed to live in a society, what does it have to do with you? When you were born, was there somebody there from the government going, "Do you accept the terms and conditions?" No. Some philosophers, like Rousseau, tried to get around this by saying that if you enjoy the benefits of society, you implicitly agree to live by its rules. Like, you might not have signed a literal contract, but by continuing to enjoy video games and hummus, you do sign an invisible one. And if you don't like it, there's the door. But again, Hume says that's bollocks.
Can we seriously say that a poor peasant or artisan has a free choice to leave his country when he knows no foreign language or manners and lives from day to day by the small wages which he acquires? We may as well assert that a man, by remaining in a vessel, freely consents to the dominion of the master, though he was carried on board while asleep and must leap into the ocean and perish the moment he leaves her.
Agreement is not how society was formed, and it's clearly not how society works now. However, that's not the point. It's not meant to be an accurate historical story. Social contract theory is meant to give us a nice test to evaluate the societies we do live in. We can look at a government, or an institution, or even a specific piece of legislation, and ask ourselves, is this the sort of thing that free, equal people would agree to live under? And if the answer to that is no, then we have good reason to reject it. With that in mind, you can maybe see how, from one perspective, this was kind of a radical idea at the time. Human beings are born free and equal, and governments are only legitimate if you agree to them? That kind of talk could spark a revolution. The
Hell
17th
yeah,
century
brother.
philosopher Robert Filmer said people aren't born free and equal. That's ridiculous. Children aren't born equal to their parents. The father naturally has authority. And in the same way, the king naturally has authority over his people. To say that they're born equal is borderline treason. Filmer was very into the idea of dads having power. He wrote a book about his ideas that was literally called Patriarcha. If this were 2019 YouTube, I'd make a joke like, "Step on me, daddy," but I think culturally we're past that now. Social contract theory says that governments should be established by agreement, not force or religion. And that is also a revolutionary idea. There's a bit of a battle for the human soul going on here. Because according to Rousseau, again, human beings can come together and agree and make progress. Government can set people free to do that if it's arranged in the right way. But some of Rousseau's contemporaries said, no, you've forgotten about sin. Humans are inherently wicked. They have a tendency towards evil. The job of government is to keep a lid on that. It should be run by people who know what purity and faith is, not set everyone free to indulge their sinful desires. And this battle continues to this day. There are still people who say, no, the right to govern does not come from the people, at least not ultimately. It comes from God. And so on behalf of God, we will take control of society, whether people agree or not. Whether it's Christian nationalists in the USA trying to overturn elections, or the Taliban and ISIS, this philosophical issue is not ancient history, it's happening right now. Speaking of history though, here's some context that might help ground all this abstract theory. Robert Filmer and Thomas Hobbes both lived through the English Civil War, a very bloody and bitter conflict between the forces of King Charles I and Parliament that was very much about this question, who has the right to govern? Filmer was on the king's side, which turned out to be a bad decision because in 1649, Charles I had his head cut off. When a British monarch dies, that's when the English are at their most dangerous because suddenly anything is possible. A dude named Oliver Cromwell takes over and decides to murder everyone in Ireland. Some random guy named Gerard Winstanley invents communism on a hill.
Hell yeah, brother.
Christmas for a while. It was a busy time for me. But 11 years later, everyone calms down a little bit. Cromwell's dead now, so Charles's son, Charles, becomes King Charles II. Now, one thing you need to know is that everyone in England at this time hates Catholics. Don't like them. Why are you having your religious services in
I mean, I don't like them either, to be honest with you. Catholics are historically pretty shit. Just saying.
Latin? Speak English, like Jesus did. Anti-Catholic suspicion is rife. Senator McCarthy has a list of Catholics in government. There's debate about whether Catholics should be allowed in women's toilets. The police are stopping people in the streets like, is that incense? And they're going, no, it's weed, I swear. So everything is already really
It's fucking
normal.
awesome.
And then in 1685, Charles II dies as well, leaving no legitimate heir. He does have a very special illegitimate daughter, but she doesn't count. So his younger brother James becomes King James II. And there's an immediate problem, because James is Catholic. But wait, it's okay.
Ew.
His daughter,
Dirty Catholics.
Mary, who is next in line for the throne, is Protestant, so it's all fine. It's gonna be okay. Unless he has a son. Oh, he just had a son! And oh, the son is Catholic. Time for England to become even more normal. Okay, what if the prince of a completely different country came over and we just made him the king instead? So, they did that. In 16...
I'd want to have, I personally would rather have someone come over from a different country and make them the leader of the country than a fucking dirty Catholic.
88, William of Orange, who was Prince of the Netherlands, came over and kicked James off the throne in the Glorious Revolution, thus ending the reign of the Stuart royal family. which is why the descendants of Charles's illegitimate daughter are making YouTube videos now instead of living in Buckingham Palace. I could have been a princess, but no, my great uncle James just had to be a Catholic. And this is the context in which John Locke publishes his famous books, the two treatises of government. The first book, which hardly anybody reads now, is a sentence-by-sentence refutation of Robert Filmer, Love the Pettiness. The second one, the really famous one, contains all of Locke's arguments about how governments should be formed by people agreeing. Locke supported the Glorious Revolution. He thought that James's failures as a king meant that he had reneged on the social contract, so the people had the right to take up arms and remove him. And it had a big impact. Less than a century later, across the Atlantic, George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, and a lot of my most famous clients read John Locke, and they were like, whoa, this guy's based. We should do a revolution. We should get rid of King George. And then sing a musical about it. Alexander Hamilton! I tell the story of this context partly because it's interesting, and partly so you understand this philosophy did not come from nowhere. It was written in a particular time and a particular place, and it bears the marks of its origin. And that is going to be very important now as we turn to some of the modern criticisms of social contract theory, starting with some radical feminism.
Oh, hell no, brother. I can't do it, brother. Yeah, no. Feminism's great. I just don't like fucking TERFs. TERFs are annoying as shit.
This book is The Sexual Contract by Carol Pateman. It's a classic of second-wave feminism from 1988. Pateman studied social contract theory, and she has a few notes. In this section of the video, I'd like to take a detailed look at her work. You may not agree with everything she says. I certainly don't. But it will be...
I mean, if you agree with everything that someone says, that just says more about you than it does about the other person. Like, you're allowed to disagree. Like, fuck, I disagree with other leftists all the time. Like, it's a part of being a human. You're not gonna agree on everything. Like, fuck, I don't agree with everything that Hassan says. I don't agree with everything that Philosophy 2 says. I don't agree with everything that Thoughtslime says, etc. It's okay to disagree with others, as well as it's okay to agree with those on the other side sometimes. Well,
provocative. Pateman's general thesis is that the story of the social contract, this supposedly radical idea about free people agreeing, is first of all a lie, but secondly, it hides the truth about how society really operates. In particular,
I don't agree with everything I say. I mean, yeah, that's fair. I don't expect you to. I don't expect everyone to agree with me on everything, or even like most things.
As a feminist, she focuses on the ways in which what happens to women gets buried in the fine print. She says there's the official social contract, and then underneath there's a second sexual contract. The hidden rules which give men, the male sex, political control over women, the female sex. This idea of there being a second hidden contract has been really influential in the last 40 years of philosophy, especially in critical race theory, as we'll see later on.
CRT,
Remember the
baby!
state of nature, the idea we talked about earlier? It's whatever comes naturally to human beings and society is everything built on top. Well, Pateman points out that a lot of the classic theorists made some pretty big and pretty political assumptions about the nature of women, like a lot of men did back then. John Locke said that women are natural subjects. We're born to do what we're told. Rousseau said that we can't be rational and objective like men are because we're too bimbo-brained. Even though the state of nature is
Totally.
supposed to be before society, there's some cross-contamination going on here. According to the classic theorists, the social contract is something that men do. Men agree to make society. Women can't. That's just our nature. So we get to live in it. Specifically, we get to inhabit the roles that we are naturally suited for, according to men. We get to be their wives and their mothers. And that's a crucial detail. Pateman says this wasn't an accidental oversight. These philosophers didn't just forget that women existed. The reason we're not at the table is because we're what's on the menu. Part of society's job, she says, is to regulate men's access to our bodies for sex and reproduction. Every man is...
I mean, like, conservatives still believe in that shit, though. Like, they only believe that women are, like, not their own fucking people and can't make their own fucking decisions. And they only believe that, they should, fucking women should be used for pumping out children.
Endowed by his creator with an inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of pussy. The hidden rule, the sexual contract, is that women exist for men. And, she continues, if you assume that women exist for men, that we're naturally suited only for the domestic world, not the political one, then marriage is the legal embodiment of that assumption. Think of things like women being given away by our fathers at a wedding, taking our husband's last name, promising to obey, women not being allowed to own property when they're married, husbands being legally allowed to rape and beat their wives.
And, like, that shit still happens, too. Like, it's fucking nuts. Like, and completely not okay. Like, it still happens, and it's still fucking disgusting.
Pateman says the institution of marriage is clearly designed to express and reinforce the assumption that women are secondary. Now you might want to say, hang on a minute. Husbands used to be able to do all that stuff, but marriage has been reformed. It's no longer legal to beat your wife, for instance, so is it still inherently patriarchal? Pateman says, yes. If you strip out all the patriarchal stuff, it wouldn't be marriage anymore. It'd just be a contract for sexual exclusivity or cohabitation or whatever. She says marriage would be obsolete without patriarchy. But again, you might want to come back and say some women choose to get married. Some of us want to be actress/YouTuber girl bosses taking over the world, but some of us want to be trad wives and stay at home with the apron and the red lip. And the thigh highs and the cat ears. That's what makes some women happy. So is it still patriarchal if you do it voluntarily? This question, is it empowering if you do it voluntarily, is something that women have been asking ourselves for decades about all sorts of things, like marriage, but also wearing revealing clothing or being a sex worker, which...
Oh no, heaven forbid you show your ankle as a woman. A man can't control himself, so you're not allowed to show your ankle. Oh no.
And also does not like. Funnily enough, there is another academic text that just came out by one of my favorite philosophers, which addresses this same question. It's Kim Petras' new album, Slut Pop. On the one hand, it's about a woman exerting control over her sexuality as she sings, I'm a superpower bitch, so power, empowerment. But on the other hand, her superpower is making men and the album was produced by Dr. Luke. So is it also reinforcing the sexual contract? Maybe. A lot of big feminist questions being asked here. It's a very rich text. We might say that the album is a seminal work. Pateman says, doing it voluntarily, that's how they get you. You do it voluntarily, but even so, the institution of marriage still reflects the idea that this is the only kind of contract you're capable of making. The story about free, equal people agreeing hides the reality of the exploitation. But wait, there's more. She's also very critical of employment contracts for the same reason.
Damn, bro, did I just see an elbow? I can't help myself now. Fuck. You're right. I can't contain it. Oh.
Imagine that there's a 50s dude named Bert Mansley, and every morning he goes to work in the Chrysler dealership from 9 to 5, and every evening he comes home to his catgirl trad wife and he says, "Honey, I made $100 today." Bert is, allegedly, a free man. He sells his labor power, his ability to work, to his employer, unlike a slave who is themselves bought and sold. And again, Bert does it all voluntarily. Pateman says that's bollocks. You can sell your blood or your hair or anything that can be detached from you, but your labor power can't be detached from you. If you think it can, try sending your labor power to work whilst you stay in bed. The idea that we have pieces of ourselves that can be parceled out and sold, like our time or our skills, is, she says, a fiction. Bert isn't free. In exchange for wages, he does as he's told, like a good little boy. The reason he accepts it is because when he comes home, he at least gets to boss around his wife. And so, she says, modern society is not based on free individuals agreeing, as social contract theorists might have us believe. It is based on the economic exploitation of everyone and the sexual exploitation of women. What a way to make a living! So, that's Pateman. And now, some questions. Starting with the big one. For the grand prize of £1 million, what is the definition of woman?
Someone who identifies as a woman. That's what a woman is in my eyes. Doesn't matter if they're, like in the transitional state between, becoming, trans, or if, you know, if they just identify as a woman. Like, who fucking cares?
We're talking here about the female sex and the male sex. So who exactly is in which category? I can help you out here. We can phone a friend. The Oxford English Dictionary defines woman as, oh, no way am I touching that one, chief. Bateman has quite a flexible approach.
A person like every person, that's also a very good answer.
She says we don't need to obsess about chromosomes or genitals or anything like that. To draw out the way in which the meaning of men and women has helped structure major social institutions is not to fall back on purely natural categories. That means that whatever physical sex is, whether it's a biological fact or a social construct or something in between, she just wants to talk about how it gets cashed out politically. There are some other clues in Pateman's work that indicate a flexible approach. For instance, she says that marriage is not the only way the sexual contract is enforced. In modern patriarchy, a variety of means are available through which men can uphold the terms of the sexual contract. What is now labeled sexual harassment helps maintain men's patriarchal right in the public world. So enforcing the sexual contract doesn't always involve actual sex. According to Pateman, it is about controlling us for sex and reproduction, but it operates on a more general level. For example, literally, as I was highlighting this section on page 114, I was sitting alone in St. James's Park in London, and a man came up and sat right next to me and tried to chat me up. Told me how I shouldn't wear a COVID mask because I'm too pretty and that I have really, really beautiful handwriting. He felt entitled to interrupt me, to invade my personal space, and to demand my attention because I'm a woman. He saw me sitting alone, working, and he must have felt on some level, oh, this is here for me. And this flexible general approach has advantages.
The irony in this, though, is like it's mostly like European cultures that mostly do that. There, there are some African cultures that do that as well. Asian cultures are pretty notorious for doing that as well. Uh, Ironically, indigenous cultures were actually fairly good about including women into a lot of their important roles as well. Like, we like to think of fucking indigenous women as just like gatherers, but that's not even true. Like, there are some very impressive women in indigenous cultures or in indigenous history that have like even made fucking chief.
It means that if somebody can't have children or penetrative sex, like because she's too young or for medical reasons, then according to Pateman, she's still a woman. She still experiences misogyny.
And the irony in that is like conservatives wouldn't fucking consider that a woman. Like, it's fucking wild to me. Oh, what's that? You're not there to meet my reproductive needs? Okay, you're not you're not, you know, you're not a woman unless they're like 14.
She's still assumed to exist for men. And here's where I have to reveal my trap card, so to speak. If this is your first time watching Philosophy Tube and you didn't already know, I'm transgender. As we've just seen.
Oh yeah, she is transgender. She did a whole video about like transphobia and shit like that as well as like, you know, moving on, stuff like that, from being a man and everything like that as well. So it's cool. I mean, yeah, Abigail's awesome.
Everything Pateman says should apply to me as well. I get sexually harassed. I experience misogyny. I'm in the political category of woman, which makes it all the more weird and heartbreaking that the final chapter contains some pretty explicit transphobia. Pateman says that trans women are just men who are pretending, which is false and also bigoted, and she
I'd like to have a conversation with her. I mean, yeah, she's great. From the stuff that I see on Twitter, as well as, you know, her videos as well.
She also seems to be assuming that there are only two sexes and they are definitely biological and unchangeable, which, spoilers if you're watching in 1988, turns out that's not true either, but more to the point, that contradicts what she said before. Having said in chapter 1 that she's only worried about how sex gets cashed out politically, now all of a sudden she seems to be assuming that it is a fact of nature, which means she's made the same mistake she's criticizing. She realized that the state of nature was a political construction, that there was this cross-contamination going on. But at the same time, she seems to think that her view of what nature is has no politics in it and is definitely just the way things are. She writes, "The state of nature is drawn by each theorist in a manner that enables him to reach the desired solution, the political solution he has already formulated." And in the margins, I've written, yeah, that's what you're doing. Now, it wasn't okay to be transphobic in 1988 or ever. But I guess you could say that trans studies as a discipline only really started in 87, and it's not her fault that science and philosophy have since moved on. Basically, I'm not trying to cancel Carol Pateman. She's in her 80s now, and she's enjoying a philosopher's retirement, which, as I understand it, mainly involves drinking hemlock. I bought the 30th anniversary edition of her book, though, because I was hoping she might address some of these issues. There's a new foreword by the author. I thought maybe she might talk about some of the philosophy that trans people have written since then, or that sex workers have written since then, or maybe talk about gay marriage. Like, is a lesbian wedding still inherently patriarchal? That's an interesting question. Unfortunately, the new foreword is about 2 pages and it doesn't really add all that much.
I mean, if they want to really be miserable like the rest, like the rest of us, or like the rest of straight people, I say let them. Like, at marriage, you're just so fucking miserable, and
So if you are thinking of getting a copy, I'd save your money and just get the original. The reason I bring it up, though, is because Pateman's book is itself a great illustration of the things it is trying to critique. She realized that the state of nature was a political construction. She exposed the hidden rules that enforce subjugation, even as we imagine that society is based on free people agreeing. And she made the same mistakes. But there is some great stuff in here that could go on to inspire something more. And that is exactly what happened.
yeah, I mean, like, everyone's bound to, like, make mistakes and everything, so, like, it ultimately doesn't even matter too much. I think that, you know, you're bound to make mistakes, you're gonna be wrong about things. It happens, it's part of life. But, you know, you can always learn from it.
We now have everything we need to return to Detroit and think about what happened there. You'll remember that in 2009, the local government illegally raised property taxes and started evicting people from their homes when they couldn't pay, effectively stealing houses from people who were disproportionately poor and black. In 2014, they did something similar with water prices, jacking the prices up suddenly and disconnecting anyone who couldn't pay. This happened despite the fact there were laws in place that were supposed to stop it. So how come? In 1997, the philosopher Charles Mills wrote a book called The Racial Contract, inspired by Pateman. Remember her idea that women were left out of the social contract, not just as an oversight, but because we were seen...
Yeah, oftentimes, like, minority groups, like, when it comes to race, whether they be, like, black, indigenous, whatever, they generally tend to be left out of, like, political making decisions as well. It only, like, recently have we actually started to do so.
...as naturally fit for exploitation? Mills says the classic theorists did the exact same thing with people of color. John Locke is a great example. Remember the idea of the state of nature? It's whatever comes naturally to human beings, and society is everything that's built on top? Well, Locke claimed, falsely, that indigenous Americans had no society and no politics and no concept of property before colonization.
Yeah, like, famously, they were notorious for being cannibals and being barbarians as well, even though that's, like, literally not true. It's, like, the exact opposite. They were, like, far more progressive than, like, I'd say even we are now, before the British and French colonized. Like, they were fairly progressive on a lot of issues. They just didn't have outstanding technology. But, like, who cares? Like, they're just taking care of the land, they're taking care of each other. Like, I mean, sure, there were rivalries between different clans, but, like, that always fucking happens, though, regardless of wherever you go. So that ultimately doesn't matter. And, like, understandably, like, when they, you know, fucking attacked people who weren't like, native to the land, you know, it's because they didn't want their fucking land being taken from them, understandably. Like, as Abigail had said, it's society is usually based off of, like, one of two criterias, and one of them was for land.
And therefore, it was okay to take their land, because they're just living in the state of nature. America is a blank canvas, a new world. So by all means, just move in. The people living there, well, they're kind of like animals. You shouldn't be cruel to them, but fundamentally, they and their resources exist for white people in the same way that women exist for men.
Yep.
Just like Pateman said, the reason they weren't at the table was because they were on the menu. And the same thing happened in Detroit. The residents had very little say in what was happening to them or the economic conditions that caused it, Detroit had been declining financially for years because the automotive industry moved overseas and white people fled for the suburbs, which shrank the tax base, so the city had to make cuts. Then they went bankrupt in 2013. The guy who was appointed as emergency financial manager wasn't elected, he wasn't accountable to anybody, he was the one who just decided to shut everybody's water off. Clearly, this was not a system in which people came together and agreed what to do. They were not at the table, but they were on the menu. The idea behind the water shutoffs was to make it easier to sell the city's public water utility to private investors.
And that's
the homes
ridiculous.
That got foreclosed on
Like-
were sold at
Like, I knew about that, and it still baffles me.
auction, which profited Wayne County. Many of them were bought by private investors again, who started demanding that their rightful owners pay rent. In hell, we wish we thought of that. In this way, we can see that the racial contract has an economic side to it. Scholar Bernadette Atuahene coins the term predatory cities. Cities that, when they can't pay their bills, start sucking the blood out of their own people. For example, say you're one of the people whose taxes got illegally raised. Well, you could file a complaint with the city about it. But the complaints department has been cut so much that it's now one woman named Linda, and Linda has 15,000 cases. You could scrape the money together somehow and pay it, but you'll have to take a day off work and go across town and queue for 5 hours to pay it in person because there's no online billing. At a certain point, the system becomes a lot better at hurting you than it does at helping you. And when that happens, it's people who are already vulnerable who get hit the hardest. And the racial contract also has a mental side. The technical philosophy word here is epistemological. Epistemology is the study of knowledge. For example, remember that guy in the park who came up to me? He probably thought that he was just being nice, because part of what the sexual contract does is it blocks men from realizing what they're really doing. If I had said to him, "Can I help you with something? Why are you interrupting me?" He probably would have thought that I was the one who was being rude, because as a woman, my desire for privacy and security was not just secondary, but almost unintelligible in the face of his desire to control my time and attention. In the same way,
And like the thing with that though is like a lot of men, whether knowingly or unknowingly, like I'm guilty of this myself. We all do it. Like it's an unfortunate reality that actually happens. Like I do it myself. I'm sure other people in chat do it. Like it happens. Because, you know, we think we're being the nice guy or whatever, and we don't always take into consideration on how, like, on how the other person feels. Like, I have gotten significantly better at that compared to what I used to be. Like, oh my god, I was so fucking bad. But, like, sometimes I still do it subconsciously without recognizing it, so... Yeah, everyone does do it. Yeah, it's definitely something that you have to rewire your brain for thinking for doing that, and it's a very hard process to do so as well, because you know men are brought up to be that way. It's just how it is. Like, especially like now without, you know, because we don't always see women as like equals or whatever. It's pathetic. But I have gotten much better at that.
Says that the racial contract can block white people from realizing what's really happening. In Detroit, even after the evidence came out that what was happening was illegal and racist, city officials kept saying, "But just pay your bills." Like They were so invested in the story of the social contract, they couldn't see the truth. The residents' desire for justice and fairness was almost unintelligible in the face of the city's desire to control their property and their resources.
The federal courts, along with state...
And like, the thing when it comes to that, though, is like, I don't think she'll touch on it, but racism comes from an inherent place of fear. Like, they generally tend to fear, or white people generally tend to fear the other group, whether they be black, Asian, brown, whatever. Like, it's so stupid. And like, the whole reason on why they're so afraid of it is because they recognize the amount of horrible shit that they do to other people, and if they ever like become a minority, they think that, you know, they'll the minority groups that we have now will do the same shit to them as they did. That's why they're so afraid of it.
State and local government assume the existence of a valid and enforceable contract between Black Detroiters and the city of Detroit, undergirded and protected by civil rights law. However, this contract is a fiction, impossible under the current socio-legal order. Despite formal guarantees to the contrary, we had no right to expect due process, responsive or competent government, dignity, decency, or the basic ability to sustain our lives through the consumption of water.
Now, I never like to tell a client that their case is hopeless. Charles Mills was optimistic that by including more people in the social contract, things could get better. Like, the idea of a system where everyone comes together and agrees what to do is great. You just need to actually do it. There were some people in Detroit who got their water turned back on and their property taxes fixed. It is also possible to overcome epistemological blocks. It's not like one division where everybody's walking around hypnotized. For example, we could apply it to this video. When I was done writing it, I went back and I looked at the script and I realized that I explained Pateman and then Mills. Partly because it's chronological, but partly because, as a white woman, it's easier for me to start with something that I kind of get and then build out. But that's not true of everybody. That's not a neutral way of presenting things.
Another thing when it comes to it is that whenever like there's a radical movement at play, we generally don't tend to think of, like, usually it tends to be like the white people, or white passing people, especially the men, when it comes to movements. When in reality it generally tends to be marginalized communities, marginalized peoples as well, that generally tend to do it or tend to like be the backbone of said movements. It's we don't see them as like equals, which is pathetic. Like, especially like women of color. Like, women of color get it all like the worst, and it's so wrong to me.
That's my whiteness affecting how I gather and interpret knowledge. And the fact that I can become aware of that suggests that maybe these blocks can be worked on. But
we also when it comes to like leftist stuff, like everyone talks about like Marx, Lenin, Mao, but very rarely are there like, do we actually bring up like black philosophers as well, or women in the same vein when it comes to it.
Pateman is less cheery. She says it's tempting to think that if we just include enough people in the social contract, it'll get better. But in her opinion, it's always been built on the exploitation of the people who aren't at the table. She says you can try and listen to a diversity of voices, but diversity often just means that people get a chance to speak, not that they're actually understood or given any power. As your lawyer, I can only tell you what the books say. Which strategy to pursue will be up to you. But hopefully, now that you know the facts of the case, you can make a more informed decision. And speaking of decisions, there is the matter of my fee. Normally, I would take your immortal soul to hell, but patreon.com/philosophytube is where you can sign up to pledge a couple of dollars a month in support of this show. And speaking of shows, I have...
Okay, I think she's just gonna talk about that. Yeah, I think that'll probably be it for today. So we had some fun. We talked about some developing situations. We did all sorts of things, so we'll wait and see what happens with the we'll wait and see what happens with the Klondike papers, if anything actually comes from that, and what's all true in that and everything, because it's still developing entertainment. It was entertaining. Yeah, it was. So yeah, we'll see what happens with the Klondike papers. I have a feeling that there are going to be bits and pieces of it that are real. There are probably going to be bits and pieces of it that are falsified. It just really all depends on what all comes out. I'm gonna keep an eye on it and give updates on it next week. So we'll see. We'll see what happens, because a lot of Canadian people that cover politics are talking about it. So it could have some legitimacy, but like when it surrounds like fucking anything around the Conservatives, like who knows what's true and what's not at this point. Like they do so much horrible shit that honestly, like anything that's like that comes out being like, yeah, they're fucking awful, is like it's probably true. So yeah, we'll probably have some updates about it next week. Hopefully we'll have some more fun there. I did want to touch on some other stuff, but there wasn't enough time today, so yeah, we might do it next week if we have enough time, because I want to have some more fun next week. I want to watch more Marketplace, because I know chat loves Marketplace. It's always a fun time. So yeah, that'll be it. More fun for next time, hell yeah. It'll be so much fun. Till then.